retired professor. She has more than 40 years of experience in church, community, education, and corporate interfacing, and has inspired thousands with her inclusive approach to relationships, classroom instruction, community building, and leadership training. She founded the How to Love movement and created a relationship growth curriculum to help believers transform their relationship with themselves and others. Dr. Deborah has a psychotherapeutic practice in Tamarack, Florida.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Deborah, and welcome, and thank you so much for allowing me to share this marathon race to save the family. I am Dr. Deborah Harris, and I am a marriage and family therapist, so this is a great place for me to be at this time, and thanks so much for allowing me to join with you. So, living with boundaries. We are connected, yet we are separate. And at the end of it, we're in this together. And I thought I would make that a point, because when you talk about boundaries, you basically evoke the idea that there is a disconnect, there is a line, there is a space, a bridge, a wall, if you will, between you and someone else. And in this case, it's individual bodies. So there is a place where I end and you begin. And if you look at the map, you can see these dark outlines basically reminding us that there are some people that are being bound by some lines, and which means there are some people that are on the inside of those lines and some people on the outside of those lines. So when you talk about boundaries, you're talking about the need for there to be a separation, but that separation need not be a negative separation. It is just a definition of who you are or who I am. So when we talk about healthy boundaries, we're just basically being very clear in our communication. Having boundaries means honoring ourselves as separate individuals whose needs and wants are often differ from someone else's. Now, understanding that when you hear that, it sounds like a very selfish thing, and of course it is, but selfish does not have to be bad. Of course, again, I am inside this body. This defines who I am. You are inside of yours. That defines who you are. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It just means that we're two different people with two sets of needs and wants. And even if we have similar desires, there is a point where we won't necessarily agree. And so we have to think about that as how then do we be healthy being individuals without doing harm to others. So healthy boundaries means just affirming who you are as a person, as a self, and affirming your interests as they may be different from mine. And then we're going to talk more about what that means to negotiate those differences. All right, so there we go. There you go. Sorry, guys. So I had to, and I'm a believer. So whenever I think about doing presentations, especially if I'm talking to believers, scriptures just come to me. So this is one that jumped at me right away because I knew that it was connected to what it is that we're trying to do here when we talk about dealing with boundaries and having healthy ones. Matthew 5:37 says, "But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh from evils." I'm sorry about the King James translation error. That's what I think in those terms. That's what I grew up listening to. But the operative words here are yes and no. And that simply means just be honest in your communication. Just say what you think. Just say what you mean. And that's important because lots of times, because we, depending on how we negotiate our boundaries, we don't always speak clearly and say exactly what we mean. So to have healthy boundaries is to know what you want for yourself, know what others want from you, and then most importantly, how do you find balance between what you want and someone else wants? Because, like I said earlier, just because we have different desires, different aspirations or goals or preferences, does not mean we have to be at odds with each other. There is a way to respect who you are as a person and me respect who I am as a person, and still be productive in a relationship together, because the fact that we are in a relationship suggests that there is a difference between you and me. Otherwise, we'd be the same person. Even though I have to say, you are in a relationship with yourself. So now, let's talk about relationships and boundaries, because we are talking about the family. And as you look at the diagram in front of you, and let me make sure that my picture is not covering up. As you look at the diagram in front of you, you see several things. You see, in the middle, you see yourself and mental health, and I'm a mental health professional, family therapist by training. Just in case they didn't tell you all my great things that I've done in the field, I used to be a family therapy professor, and one of the things that I did was train students who wanted to be family therapists. And there's something we call the person of the therapist. That's the individual that's in relationship, say, with their clients. So in the middle, we have the self and your mental health. Now, I put that in red to draw attention to the person who has to make distinctions between themselves and others. Now, at the very top of our circle of circles, you see the one that has God, spirit, / faith walk. Now, I put that in red because for me, that's understood. So I don't want to have to keep saying, inviting God into your relationship, because that's understood. And I do know everybody that's in church professing to be a Christian may or may not be one. But for the sake of this example, my assumption is if you are here and listening to me now, you're in your church, you have some kind of relationship with with God or the divine creator of all things. So that's understood. So when I talk, if I don't bring God up, just insert God in wherever you think I'm leaving God out, because I know that that is understood in however we move, especially when we're talking about saving a family. I can't imagine what other way we're going to be able to do that. So look at the different circles. So you got you in the middle, and then of course your relationship with your vertical relationship with the Lord. Now you got families, or the familia, and that is anybody that's related to you. The larger family, grandparents, great-grandparents, cousins, aunties, uncles. And then I have this spouse. If you are married and you are in a relationship with your mate, and you are because you're married, then those are boundaries there. And so what I would like to do is just kind of hang out here for a minute, because when we're talking about saving the family, in this race, even though we call it a marathon, and if you've ever run a marathon, and I have, and it's just no easy thing to do. But if you've ever done it, let me just say I walked, ran the marathon, but I finished, and that's what's really important. So I can say I've done it. So your spouse, that relationship has boundaries. First of all, you're in it together. It's two of you. And, I know we say the two become one, but I think we stopped saying that so much because we realize how difficult it is for two people to walk together and agree. It is not as easy as it sounds. And because of that, we have to acknowledge that boundaries have to be respected, but they have to be negotiated. So while you are connected, you are disconnected. But that disconnect does not mean that you are not concerned about the other one, because that's what inclusion is a word that comes to my mind. But that is what being in a relationship with someone is about, is figuring out how we do this as a couple when we talk about you and your husband or wife. Now, personal, sexual. Now that's no accident that that came right next to the spousal relationship, because we know, and if you've married and have been married for any amount of time, there are some differences there between men and women, and not necessarily the same kind of differences. And so that is something else to negotiate. You know, I can hear, I've seen many couples over the years. I've been doing this over 20 something years, and they have different ways of approaching sexuality. That is something to negotiate. And so at what point, and of course I hear scriptures in my head about whose body belongs to whom, and that kind of thing. But again, that is what the scriptures say. But how you negotiate that in your relationship has much to do with your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your partner, and your relationship with God, and what the Bible says, and the grace of God. There's a lot of things to negotiate. So I want to invite you, while you are in this environment where everybody is supposed to be doing what God wants them to do, to acknowledge that it's not so easy to do. It requires a certain amount of selfishness and a certain amount of selflessness. And so how do you negotiate that when you're talking about being healthy and being thinking about the fact that you are two different people? So your calling in your career and or job, if you work for someone, or if you have your own business, or you're an entrepreneur, and I put call in there because I know some of us see, no matter whatever our livelihoods are, we see them as callings. So let's just call them all callings. You're doing what you are most capable of doing, whether it is being a teacher, or being a banker, or being a mother or a father. Whatever you view as your call requires a certain kind of understanding about where you end and where it begins. And I put it that way because the boundaries there, because you have a partner, you have your wife or your husband in your life. You have, of course, your relationship with God. You have yourself. And at what point do you privilege the boundaries that come between you and what you've been placed here to do, and these other relationships that you have created? So let me move on to excuse me, guys. Friendships and fictive kins. I'll come back to that, because since I'm talking about you and your family, I want to talk about parent and children. Because imagine, there are so many people who have callings on their lives, and let's say musicians or singers. They or professional actors and actresses, or ball players. Their call, their career is such that they have to spend a lot of time, and let me throw professors in there, and teachers. They spend a lot of time away from home, a lot of time serving others, a lot of time providing for others, a lot of time doing stuff for other people. But it's their call. It's why they're here. But they have a spouse. They have some children. They maybe have some parents. They have themselves. There are a lot of things that have to happen in order for you to best negotiate what that means to fulfill your call, but to fulfill your place in the lives of these other people. And so how do you draw the line when it comes to giving your mate the attention she or he deserves, or giving your children the time that they deserve with you? how do you consider your parents if you are a millennial and you're living at home and you have these things you have to do, or you have elderly parents, I'm sorry, and you are a boomer. How do you divide yourself with your elderly parents and this call in your life? So that is extremely important. And a lot of families, and I know professional people, they can go on and on about how they don't feel like they're important. But that's a matter of how you, as a person that's called, divide your time and your space and yourself with those things and those people. So now let's talk about your friendships and fictive kin. And fictive kin is something that Africans in America have, and it's a way of being respectful of elders. I would say that. And also, and we call each other, you know, brothers and sisters, because we grew up with a very soulful way of knowing ourselves and relating to God. And so that became a part of the way we look at the world. I can remember Aunt Mary and Uncle Spencer. And that's what I call those two people that all of my life. And then one day, one of my cousins, who I believe she was just kind of hating, told me that they weren't my uncle and my auntie. Now, I never asked my parents how we were related. I just, because I called her Aunt Mary and him Uncle Spencer, I thought they were my auntie and uncle. Well, it turns out that they were just that close to our family, and I wouldn't dare call him Mr., and I definitely wouldn't call him Spencer. I would have to call him uncle or auntie. And that's how I became, that's how my parents taught me to relate to older members of our community who were just that close to them. So that is a part of setting boundaries, respectful boundaries around those kinds of relationships. And of course, we have friends, and sometimes there has to be, while we have different kinds of relationship with friends, just say somebody who you're really tight with, but y'all don't see eye to eye on everything. And so you have to figure out how you're going to walk together and be agreed, or walk together without agreeing, but at the same time, still be connected. And that is an important part of what it means to have boundaries, is to not lose the connection just because you are you. You just, people said, that's just me. That's just how I am. How do you not lose connection with someone while you still have to be clear about the boundaries? And so when you think about your families, your relationship with yourself, your relationship to your mental health, because your mental health is being affected by all of these relationships. And all that means, my brothers and sisters, all that means is how you negotiate relationships on an emotional level. Your feeling about them, and how your feelings about these important people and things influence your relationship with them and other people. And then how do you find balance while you are trying to be true to who you are, but trying to be respectful of who they are? That's what it means to have healthy boundaries. So as you think about getting the family back into a place where it can grow and thrive, then you want to think about, how do you find balance? How do you be true to who you are, but also respectful and true to who others are? Feel free to, I know you're listening to this. I hope you're taking notes. If you have questions or anything, I'm sure they have arranged for you to put some questions down. If I could be available even on the day when you guys do this, I wouldn't have any problem at all responding to questions. Okay, I keep on forgetting what to do. Oh, there we go. Oh, we have to do this, don't we? Okay. Okay, so I'll see what I need to do. All right, so balancing requires decision-making and action. Requires decision-making and action. So you have to find a way, of course, to to exercise this healthy boundary, the healthy boundaries in your life. And part of that is counting the cost. You know, there are sacrifices in relationships. That's just the way it goes. If you have a dog, a puppy, a cat, there are sacrifices to be made to stay in a relationship with that animal. So imagine now how much more negotiating it requires, because you just can't tell your kid to sit and they stay sitting. I'm talking about a 2-year-old. And you can't just expect your husband or wife to just do what you tell them to, and that's the end of it. I know that there used to be some good old days where that happened, but I don't think that happens the way it used to. All right, I do have jokes, y'all. All right, so counting the cost and the sacrifices that you have to make, and requires careful consideration, like I mentioned, of who you are, who other people are, and then who you are together. That is the most critical thing in relationships. And lately I've been seeing a lot of more couples in distress, and we all know why we're spending more time together, so we have more time to figure out what we like and what we don't like, and what's working and what we don't, what's not working. When before we could just kind of go on to work and forget it ever happened until something shows up again. But we don't have that luxury like we used to. So I get more and more couples that come in, and when they come in, they're trying to figure out how to communicate in a way that they can stay together, have the relationship thrive like it once did. So there are a lot of things to consider. That is your values. Like if you have a cause or a mission that you're on, that is something to consider. Progress. Sometimes balancing your boundaries, decision making has to do with where do you want to go. So when you think about the family, you think about your individual family. Do you guys have goals for what you'd like to see happen? Do you have some cause that's important to you? It could be a political cause. Whatever it is, you have to make decisions about how you're going to relate to each other and to that thing to get you guys where you're trying to go. So, and bringing in that whole idea again of the family, the race to save the family. If you just think about yourself and your individual family, what are you putting in place that you guys can say, this is our goal, this is what we're working on, this is what we're trying to fix, this is what we're trying to do. Because when you make decisions that requires this balancing, you have to think not just about you, not just about them, but your entire family, the children, and all together. I remember growing up, every now and then my daddy would call a family meeting, and we'd get around the table, maybe we're eating, he used to like, he used to make different kind of snacks every night, and we would sit around the table and eat whatever snack he made, which wasn't a snack, it was usually like eggs and onions or pork and beans and sausage or something. And then we just talk about our family, and he was an entrepreneur, so he talked about his tile business, and we just talked and listened. And I don't remember if he allowed us to have much to say, but we were just glad to be at the table and eat the snacks. So, but it was a coming together of the family. And so I don't know what you do to bring your family together to talk about what's going on. And before something goes wrong, get them together and just say, okay, what y'all think? This is what mom and I are planning to do. This is what dad would like to do, or we got to move. When we moved here some 30 years ago, my daddy was in his 50s, but he wasn't quite happy about that. But we had to have that conversation with him. When I had my first baby and got pregnant, before that, when my husband asked for my hand, I'm just gonna quote my daddy after he asked him, he had to go across the bridge. And if you old enough, you know what that means. So, but there is a talking, a come together, a creating an environment where everybody has to engage what is about to happen in the family. So decision making, if you can invite your children into that, then it will mean so much to them whether you ask them what they think or not. But if you ask them what they think, then I just would invite you to go ahead and listen when they tell you, because you never know. They might have something to say that you never would have thought about. So it requires balancing requires decision making and action. So while you have to have this conversation about what you're going to do, then you have to prepare to do something to get you where you're trying to go. So family is what this really is about. And you have to ask yourself, when you're thinking about boundaries and what's important to you, what really matters? I say that to clients all the time. What really matters? Because so many times people are so invested in what they want and what they think that they're not thinking about the other person. And so they're thinking about their own boundaries, but they're not thinking about the other person's needs and wants. So there are too many people, let's talk about unhealthy boundaries, who basically, they go along with things just because they don't want to argue. They don't want to disagree, and they're afraid of what the person's going to say if they don't agree with them. So they just kind of go along for peace sake. And you know a lot of people that do that. And do you know, if you stop right now and think about all of the terrible decisions that you have seen people make, not you have seen people make because they just did not want to have the contention between them and someone else. Or for some reason, they were bullied. Somebody who talks loud and knows a lot is intimidating, and so people just acquiesce. They just go along with them. These are unhealthy examples of boundaries, because you're not speaking up against somebody that somebody needs to speak up when the person is talking, because they don't know everything. I already mentioned fear of conflict, whether it's healthy or not. And I have to say this, sometimes it may not feel good, but it is the discussion you gotta have. You gotta have, and you know it. You know it. It right here, you know it. But you're so afraid of making people uncomfortable or making people unhappy or whatever it is, till you go along with it. And that means you're not taking care. You're not taking care of yourself, and you're not taking care of that other person, and you're not taking care of, in this case, let's say the family, the larger system, the people who are circumstances around what you're trying to make decisions about. But I'm also finding that people cannot articulate with reason. They can tell you, they can argue about what they want, but if you ask, and when I say argue, I mean fuss, and I mean loud talk, I mean talk it over. They can do that easily, but many times people cannot articulate calmly what it is that they want. And because there's a lot of fears and things that are going on, and that's understandable. But this is something we got to learn how to do if we're going to negotiate our boundaries in a way where everybody wins. Not just the bully, not just the whiner, but everybody has to think about the larger family, the group. Okay, people don't like the discomfort, they don't like to be uncomfortable. Then the other side, so the first part of the unhealthy part is people that just go along. The other one is the people who just have to have their way. And they are self-serving, self-centered, and disconnected. Meaning, when I say disconnected, they could care less about what you stand to gain or what you stand to lose. They just want their way. That's somebody who is, for some reason, not only are they inconsiderate and they're rigid, and when I say rigid, they have to be right, but they also have a fear of being controlled. So let me say this about that person. They are just as innocent as the ones who are being bullied. And I say innocent, I'm just saying they are taking care of themselves the way they know how. They take care of themselves by being, bullies, or pushing people around, or being bossy. That's how they protect themselves. The initial ones that I mentioned earlier, they take care of themselves by making everybody happy so that they don't have to be uncomfortable. So, but both are unhealthy, and neither are thinking about the other person, neither are thinking about the larger group. And so as soon as I said they're not thinking about the other person, you think the person who's going along stuff for peace sake is thinking about the other person, but they're not. Because if they were thinking about that person, they would disagree when they are feeling disagreeable. They would say, no, I don't really think that's a good idea, because if we did that, we're going to lose this, we're going to lose that, this is going to go wrong, so I don't think we should do it. So they're not thinking about the other person, because they're letting them get away with something they should not let them get away with. In both cases, they are doing what's comfortable for them, but it's not good for the group. So their boundaries are unhealthy. So now let's talk about the ones, healthy boundaries. Clear communication. That's why I thought about the yay, nay scripture when I started out, because that, what could be more clear is than yes or no. And there could be some more conversation that comes after that. But what could be more clear than that? A balanced perspective. That is, okay, I can see how even though we're not saying the same thing, we're disagreeing, but I can see the value in what you're saying. That's somebody who has the ability to do that. And then when somebody points out to you like, oh, that's not gonna work because we're gonna lose this, lose that, and lose this. When they do that, then you can say, you know what, you're right. That's honest self-reflection. That means I do know a lot, but I don't know everything. And what you just said makes so much sense. Let's do that. All right, that's healthy. That's balanced. You're comfortable with conflict. Too many people are not, but that's where the best things happen, when somebody can say, I don't agree, because if we do it this way, blah, blah, blah. And if you can calm yourself enough to articulate exactly how what you're saying is more advantageous for everybody, people will listen. But you got to calm yourself and set those boundaries around not just what you think and what you believe, but the interests of the group. That's healthy boundaries. So your values are for the greater good. And that's what, and I got sacred cause, righteousness. You know, I talk about, it's one thing to be right, which is what's on this other side, and it's another thing to be righteous. So something may be the right thing to do, but who is it going to, what's going to be the fallout? Who's going to benefit from it? That's the conversation that a person who has good, healthy boundaries would say, well, I see the value in what you're saying, but this is going to make, how about the ozone deplete? How about that? You might can get across town quicker in a car than you would in a buggy or walking, but something larger is at stake. You're losing something that's more important than getting across town, you know, I guess, quicker than a day or two. But that's the difference between right and righteous. Okay, how about, and then the connecting it to the self, to others in the larger system. And that's what healthy boundaries do. They create connections. Even though it doesn't always feel right, even though sometimes you have to look at yourself and be critical, even though you have to look at someone else and say, oh, I don't think that's gonna work. But in the end, it serves everybody, the greater good. And that's what you want to think about when you're thinking about healthy boundaries. So I am me, you are you, but there is a place of negotiating that will get us both what we want. And that is for the good of the community, for the good, in this case, of the family. So maintaining connected boundaries require listening skills with your ears and with your heart. Listening to ourselves, what's in your gut. We know about when the gut is talking, we ignore it so many times. I really think that's God. I really do. I guess we should stop calling it our gut then, maybe. Change the way you spell it. Anyway, others, other people have ideas that are worth listening to. And then the Spirit of God. How many times you said, something told me to blah, blah, blah. And when it's happening and you're doing just the opposite, you hear the something telling you to do it, but you go ahead and do it. So it's learning how to listen with your ears and with your heart. That's the beginning of connecting with others. Sorry. And then you know when to act. And this is in conjunction, in cooperation with someone else, collaborating with others, because you not just have what you think, you have what someone else thinks. You not just have what you feel, you have what someone else feels. And together, you guys figure out the best course of action. And then you know how to act. How to is just, there's so much in how to. But again, it comes with being connected. And you get connected after you realize that you are not, that you are two different people with two different ideas. And what you do is you bring those together. That's creating the kind of connection, action that considers everybody and not just you and yours. And then knowing how to give grace to yourself and to the other person. Somebody calls you out and they're right, you just say, oh, my bad. I was wrong. And then when they're calling you out, they're not trying to make you look bad. They're just saying, man, I'm sorry, but that's not going to work if we do it like that. And that's everybody giving everybody else grace. And that's just liberty, freedom to be wrong and to be right, but at the same time, to think about the group and having the kinds of connection that you really want. And of course, how you say it, I don't even have to elaborate on that. Just grace, I think, suggests the how to say it. And then again, I kept scriptures that kept coming back to me. And so I won't read them, but I'll be quiet a minute and let you read them so that you can see that there is scripture that suggests, and for all you theologians, I know there's a context around each one of these, and so I'm not trying to do a Bible study as much as I am offering the application of these ideas. And when we talk about boundaries and communicating in such a way to create the kind of connectedness that we really do want in our lives, in our families, and therefore in our community, and of course in our churches. I believe that was my last. Yes, it was. And I'm Dr. Deborah Harris, and I am so available. When you guys actually do this, if you want me to be available, I can, get on the phone or get on a Zoom or something and answer some questions you may have. I spend my whole life helping people figure out how to manage their boundaries, and usually it's around communicating. And one thing I find is that most people people say communication is really important, but the work that it requires to do it, it's not so easy to get them to do it. Let's just put it that way. But it's been my honor to share with you. And again, I'm open to questions. Congratulations on your conference. I hope that it was the success you planned it to be. And thank you so much for allowing me to share.